Coming up, the Ultimate Fighting Championship returns to the Windy City. A couple of #1 contenderships on the line. Who won the right to fight John Jones? Who won the right to fight middleweight champ Anderson Silva? Plus, this weekend, the interim welterweight title will be on the line. All that and more next in the cage. Welcome in the cage from the Ohio Combat Sports Academy, alongside the owner of the Ohio Combat Sports Academy, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, instructor and trainer extraordinaire Dustin Ware. I am Milan Jordan, and we've got lots to talk about this week, folks. We got the UFC on Fox 2, a couple of contending matches on the line. Some guys are looking to fight. Who would fight John Jones? Who will fight Anderson Silva? We found that out. And also this week, we've got the interim UFC welterweight title. George St. Pierre is on the sidelines because of a knee injury. Nick Diaz will face Carlos Condit for the interim title in the meantime. But, wow, Dustin, let's talk about UFC on Fox in Chicago. Went back to the Windy City. Rashad Evans, no problem with Phil Davis. Not really much of a surprise there. Chael Sonnen, Michael Bisping. That was a fight a lot of people were really looking forward to. And it was surprising, not so much it wasn't a great fight. It didn't have the fireworks that maybe some people expected or were hoping for. But the result, judging by how people watched the fight, saw the fight, was a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Sonnen fight definitely didn't really turn out maybe the way anyone expected, including Chael Sonnen. I really think, with his style of going in and trying to beat guys up and really trying to bully Bisping and take him out of his game, I think he was really surprised by the toughness and really the ability Bisping had to get to his feet and really negate any kind of offense that Chael had while putting Bisping on his back. And I think that really took Chael out of his comfort level, and it made for unfortunately a lackluster fight. I don't think Bisping really had an answer to how he's going to put Chael away. I just think he thought, well, as long as I can counter his takedowns and not take any damage, maybe I'll pull a decision out. Unfortunately, this is one of those fights where I think both fighters knew that it was probably going to be a decision that won this fight. It wasn't going to be, I'm going to submit Chael or I'm going to knock out Bisping. It was going to be one of those, I just need to be able to set my pace, dictate how I'm going to win the fight. And unfortunately for the fans, that's how it came out.
Chael Sonnen, a unanimous decision winner. A lot of people surprised by that. You and I both personally, we thought Michael Bisping won the fight. Definitely won the first 2 rounds. Chael Sonnen easily won the 3rd round. Some people thought maybe Sonnen had a chance to win the 1st round. You look at the stats, though, courtesy of Fight Metric, Sonnen outstruck Bisping, had more takedowns, had more significant strikes, but didn't have that kind of feel in the fight, though, to where at the end, Chael Sonnen wins again, unanimous decision, 29-28, by 2 judges. One judge even scored it 30-27, which I thought was absolutely ludicrous. For either guy would have gotten that. Nobody won all 3 rounds. Bisping won the first 2 rounds. You can make a question for maybe the first for Sonnen, and Sonnen clearly won the 3rd. But 30-27, and that we'll get into judging a little bit later, but that just seemed outrageous.
It did seem a little awkward, and like I said, I mean, I did think Bisping won the fight, but the caveat of I could see where a lot of people would think that Bisping didn't win the first round. And like I said, we will discuss, kind of maybe why he lost that round in the eyes of a judge. Because, in my experience, I've seen fights like this before where it is obvious. I mean, the fans, everyone, I've even seen cornermen of the guy who they thought their guy was going to lose. And then when the announcement comes, I mean, everyone, including the corner, including the fighter, is shocked. So, again, anytime you leave it up to the judges, you leave yourself open to someone else's interpretation of how you did. And when that happens, you don't have any control anymore. So,
yeah. You look at the whole body work of the fight. Bisping won, but in a 10-point must-scoring system. That's where, I guess, advantage Sonnen there. Again, a lot of people, Twitter, the internet, everything was all abuzz after this fight saying that Bisping got robbed, he should have won. Post-fight press conference, both men react to how the fight was scored.
Regarding the fight, I can't lie. I think I won rounds 1 and 2. I think in this modern day of, social networking and stuff, you just got to look at the internet, and I think it's pretty much the general consensus is that people think I won the fight. But as I said, biggest cliche in the book, don't let it go to the judges. and I did that, and Chael got the decision. Congratulations.
You know, they were close rounds. You know, even a 30-27 round, you know, I would agree that he should have got a round in there somewhere. But they could have been razor thin, but if a judge thinks you win, it leaves, you know, you can have a 30-27 round fight that's still a very close 30-27. So I don't know that judge was out of his mind. But, yeah, if it would have gone the other way, I don't know that I would be complaining.
All right, so both fighters reacting to how the fight was scored. Michael Bisping obviously disappointed, but you know what? Like he said, and like Dana White, like a lot of people say, don't ever leave it to the judges. He could have ended the fight. He didn't. Chael Sonnen could have ended the fight. He didn't. Chael Sonnen even saying, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't have gotten a 30-27 round. But he didn't say that he exactly won the fight, but he also didn't say that he lost the fight.
Right. I mean, I think he articulated the way he should. You know, obviously he knows. Fighters know when they're in there if it's close or not. They know what people are looking at. They know how they're doing in the fight. Rarely do you black out in the middle of the fight and realize, hey, I think I'm winning. You know, they kind of get an idea. And, of course, I don't expect him to say, yeah, I should have lost that fight. And really no one should expect him to say that. But realistically, it was a very, very close fight. What he said is spot on. And, again, it's just left to someone else's interpretation. You have to understand what the curriculum is and what the criteria these judges are being told they have to use to score the fight. First of all, they're scoring the fight round by round. Like I said, we'll get into this later. I want to spend a whole segment on just talking about the judging, because I think a lot of times it goes, you know, people who are just the average fan just think, well, this guy should have won or that guy should have won. They're not taking into consideration on what the job of the judge really is, and what he has set before him, and what his requirements are, and what he has to do to fairly score these bouts. It's not sitting at home or at BW3s or at your bar or whatever and just judging it while you're liquored up. That doesn't work. You know, you have to go by what the criteria is. And whether or not the criteria is wrong and the guidelines are wrong, that's left to someone else who has a higher grade grade than me to decide on what's supposed to happen there. But based on what they were given, you know, they made the right decision.
Yeah, Michael Bisping ends a 4-fight win streak for him. He falls to 22-4 in his MMA career. Chael Sonnen, meanwhile, gets as much anticipated, much awaited rematch with Anderson Silva. He will fight for the UFC middleweight championship against the Spider come this summer.
They've tried to get him to fight 4 times. That's the one thing they don't tell you, and I'm not trying to go against the brass here, but the one thing that they haven't revealed is they've offered him the fight 4 times, and he said no 4 times. Mysteriously, he's supposed to accept on the 5th. You know, the saying is 3rd time's a charm. I've never heard of 5th time's the charm. I can tell you this, I have never backed down, and I never will. If he wants to fight or is willing to, I will do my part, but this isn't my goal to help lure him out. I talk like this so I can get off the topic of Anderson. I'd rather talk about real men like Mr. Bisping, who steps in on 10 days' notice and fights me. You know, those are the kind of guys that I'd rather give media attention to, not some bum hiding in Brazil.
Chael Sonnen, now the #1 contender in the UFC middleweight division, will fight Anderson Silva. That fight, a lot of people are pegging to take place in June in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Well, you know Chael Sonnen will be welcomed with open arms.
If those blowhards with their blow darts want to come at me, they can send anybody they want, but don't send anybody you want back.
Chael Sonnen there obviously endearing himself to the Brazilian fans, but you know, this fight, it's the rematch. And the sequel, is it going to live up to the first fight? Or, because of the fact Anderson Silva has had this time to study that fight, and Anderson Silva, we've seen him in the past, whenever he's had bad performances or has suffered losses to people, he comes back with a vengeance the second time around. What do you see happening?
You know, I mean, we obviously have some time between now and that fight happens. Anderson's always shown to be a tactician in the ring. I mean, granted, he's not one of these guys that has to really evolve his game too much because he's already so good at just about everything he does. The one thing I think he would definitely try to do in this fight is to use his length a little bit more. As I've said before, Chael is going to get in your face. And he knows that the only way to really take advantage of Anderson, like he did the first time, is to take away Anderson's ability to get in the clinch, take away his submission game, which ultimately led to his demise in that fight, and really just try to beat him up, drag him late in the fight where he's shown to have questionable conditioning. And sometimes what a lot of people say about Brazilian fighters in general, sometimes if the fight goes long, their heart comes into play, whether or not they really want to win the fight. He had that fight won. He had the first fight won. He knows what it's going to take to beat Anderson. However, I think Anderson also knows I'm good enough to beat him, and I'm smart enough to see the mistakes I made in the past. I think you're going to see a little bit different game plan, a little bit more elusive Anderson Silva. much almost like in the vein of a Machida type striker in this fight. Again, there's a lot to happen between now and then, but I think it is one of the rare occurrences where you're going to see a rematch that could be as good as the first one, just because I don't think we're going to see much of a difference in terms of their overall set of skills. These guys are pretty much the same two guys that fought the first time, except they kind of know what each other are about a little bit better. But I think it's going to be the same fight. It's going to be in Brazil, the Sao Paulo, I believe the arena down there is a soccer stadium. They're talking 50, 60,000 people. I can only imagine, one, the amount of security they'll need for Chael Sonnen in and around the facility, but two, just the environment, the atmosphere is going to be probably the only thing I could probably compare it to is the early days of Pride when they would have it at the St. Thomas Super Arena and they'd have 90,000 people in soccer, those days. I mean, that environment is going to be truly historic, so it's going to be something to look forward to.
Yeah, and then you mentioned Anderson Silva knows he's good enough, he knows he's smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like him, especially in his home country of Brazil. All right, Chael Sonnen, Michael Bisping, not the only #1 contender fight on the line in Chicago last weekend. #1 contender spot in the UFC light heavyweight division was on the line between Rashad Evans and Mr. Wonderful Phil Davis. What happened there? We'll tell you next in the cage.
The Ohio Combat Sports Academy, Central Ohio's premier MMA training facility.
I felt good about the performance. You always want to do better, and I strive to do better. There's a couple missed opportunities that I wish that I would have capitalized on a little bit more, but you get better from those things. Phil Davis, he did a good job to keep me from capitalizing on those positions. But when you have it in your mind, you want to finish a fight a certain way, and it doesn't happen, it's kind of disappointing.
Rashad Evans, they're talking about his fight against Phil Davis. Clearly he won the fight. It was a unanimous decision. Rashad Evans over Phil Davis. Rashad Evans now gets the #1 contender shot in the UFC light heavyweight division going against the champion John Jones. But Rashad Evans, we've definitely seen him fight better, but you know what? He'll take a win any way he can get it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it definitely wasn't an exciting fight. I've said going into this fight that he would be able to use his experience and really just his overall athleticism to capitalize on just the lack of experience that Phil Davis had. I mean, I really think Phil going into this fight knew there was going to be a very limited window of opportunity for him to win this fight. He couldn't figure out a way to take him down early and really try to find a way to submit him on the ground. That he really knew he didn't have the experience on his feet or the real skill sets he needed on his feet to knock out a Rashad Evans. So, unfortunately for Phil, it was one of those opportunities you got there, I think, a little too early. The opportunity kind of presented itself a little too soon in your career. And for Rashad, I mean, it was a good workout. It was able to show his skills on national TV and a headline event on Fox. I still didn't see anything that makes me believe, and probably most people believe. I think after the result of this fight, I believe he was still a 6-1 underdog going into the John Jones fight. It hadn't even contracted yet.
Do you think it's a case of where Rashad, not taking Phil Davis lightly, but maybe not wanting to, I guess, put all his eggs in his basket to kind of maybe hide some things going into his fight with John Jones, even though both guys train together and they know each other very well?
I don't think that's what it is. I mean, I will say this, that whenever you're fighting, there's an opportunity for a major, we'll say, opportunity, payday, revenge, whatever you want to call it. You do want to concern yourself with the risk of injury. And so, could that have been in the back of Rashad Evans' mind, especially in the later rounds when he knew he had this fight pretty much in the bag, so to speak? Could have been. He's probably thinking, I've won the first 3 rounds, I've won 4 rounds. Let's not do something stupid and break a hand or tear a knee or get an orbital fracture from just some dumb shot.
This is a guy who's been hurt a lot and missed a lot of fights because of that.
Right, and that's the reason I'm saying this, is because he has shown that he can get nicked up. And, a lot of times you don't want to go in and fight a John Jones or any of these high-caliber guys nicked up. And so I think he kind of maybe pulled off a little bit because he wanted to be able to go 100% in training, 100% in preparation to get ready for John Jones. Because I can tell you right now, he's going to need more than 100% to beat John Jones. And just based on what I've seen in the past, what skills I've seen him show in the UFC, and just the continued evolution of it. We have not seen the best John Jones yet. We've probably seen best of Rashad, not because he's an old fighter, but he has been around for years, and really he's reached kind of his paramount, really in his skill sets. I don't see him getting better at anything enough to take out a dumb hand.
So Rashad Evans gets his wish, gets his shot at the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship against John Jones. Evans, former UFC Light Heavyweight Champion. Remember, he lost that to Lyoto Machida. But now Evans gets to now fight his former teammate, Johnny Bones Jones.
Yeah, it will be. It'll be very mental. This is a big fight, me and John, we were pretty familiar with each other, and we have that history with each other. We both don't really care too much for each other at the same time. So it's going to be a lot of things that are said. It's going to be a lot of feelings that are brought back up to the surface. So it's going to be a very mental fight. And, he said something to me a while ago, when we got into it. And he told me that he wants to show everybody that that I'm all hype and he's going to destroy me. And that right there is the biggest motivation in the world. And for him saying I'm going to make him pay. Yeah, I definitely want to put the rivalry to bed, and more importantly, get a chance to get my belt back. I feel like I can beat John Jones. I see areas in this game where I can capitalize on, and I know it's going to be a good fight. We're very familiar with each other. John Jones has one thing that over other opponents that he doesn't have over me, and we faced each other before many times. So I'm not really too worried about the mystique of John Jones, because I know at John Jones' core. I remember John Jones when he used to come up to me and be like, hey, man, what is it like when everybody takes pictures with you? So I see John Jones a little bit differently than everybody else see John Jones.
So let the hype begin. John Jones, Rashad Evans, they will fight in April, and that should be a fantastic fight. UFC 145, Rashad Evans improves to 22-1-1. Johnny Bones Jones unbeaten. So that should be a fantastic fight, and we've got 2.5 months to talk about it, so it should be a lot of fun. UFC on Fox in Chicago kicked off with a middleweight matchup. Chris Weidman going against Damian Maia. Damian Maia, BJJ extraordinaire, probably one of, if not the best BJJ player in the UFC, arguably. Chris Weidman took this fight on short notice. This guy dropped 32 pounds in a span of 10 days, but yet this fight was all Chris Weidman.
Yeah, it was really unfortunate the way this fight played out. I mean, I'm a huge, obviously being a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy, I'm a huge fan of Damian Maia and what he brings to the octagon. However, in this fight, I saw two things that were really disheartening from a fan perspective. One, I saw a guy who just was not in shape to go 3 5-minute rounds. And then secondly, and the one that really kind of bothers me as possibly a trainer, fan, and someone who really ultimately respects Damian Maia, was he didn't really show a willingness to do what it took to win the fight. Going into the third round, he had to know he was clearly behind on every scorecard, even the fans. And he just still didn't show a willingness to make whatever sacrifice he needed to make to put himself in position to win the fight. I mean, sometimes you're out there and you've got to, I'm telling my guys in between rounds, look, you're down. You lost that round. You've got to do what it takes to win this fight. If that means you're not a wrestler, but you need to get this guy down, maybe you should take a shot. Maybe you should try to engage the clinch. You're getting punched in the face a lot and you're not able to get in. You've got to take risks. At some point in this fight, he never really went for it. He never really did what it was going to take to put himself in a position to win. And I'm not saying be an all-star, all-American wrestler all of a sudden, or become, Anderson Silva all of a sudden. But do something. He just kind of plodded around on his feet and kind of let Chris just manhandle him around in the clinch, laying punches and combinations at will. It was really unfortunate. It almost looked like Damian Maia didn't want to be in there. And this is a guy who has a huge following in Chicago. He's got a huge jiu-jitsu following in Chicago. A lot of students, a lot of friends were there in attendance, and so it was unfortunate.
Yeah, and so with the win, Chris Weidman improves to 8-0, undefeated in his UFC career there. So, and here's a guy who might be slowly matriculating his way up the the middleweight ladder up there in the UFC. And again, disappointing performance for Damian Maia. All right, coming up this weekend, the UFC returns to pay-per-view. UFC 143. The welterweight interim belt will be on the line. Nick Diaz, Carlos Condit, the winner, hopefully eventually will fight the champ, George St. Pierre. How's it all going to break down? We'll tell you next in the cage.
The Ohio Combat Sports Academy, Central Ohio's premier MMA training facility.
We're back in the cage alongside Dustin Ware. I am Milan Jordan. By the way, don't forget to follow us on Facebook. Like our page, In the Cage. You can also follow us on Twitter at In the Cage Show. And, of course, you're watching us on YouTube on our YouTube channel, In the Cage Show, as well. Okay, this weekend, the UFC returns to pay-per-view, UFC 143, Las Vegas, Super Bowl weekend. And this originally was supposed to be Nick Diaz going against UFC welterweight champion George St. Pierre, GSP. He's got a knee injury. Diaz still fighting. Now he's going to fight Carlos Condit for the interim belt. And this should be, both fighters bring a lot to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is one of those fights where I believe the odds makers have it as a pick-up. I mean, a lot of people on the sport pretty much are kind of indecisive. I mean, obviously, no one likes to pick against the Diaz brother. They prove you wrong just about every time. I mean, no one has got a willingness to win. And I just talked about this with Damian Maia. This is the exact opposite. This is a guy that will do whatever, whenever, however it takes to win a fight on the street, in the cage, in a press conference. Doesn't really matter. He's going to do whatever it takes to make sure you realize he's the best one in the room. Against a guy like Condit, who has got extremely underrated submission skills, very good striking, and he has got just a mean strength and a willing. I think he wants this title. I think he not only wants to shut Diaz up, but I think he wants that opportunity against GSP. He wants to show people he's the #1 guy in the world. Whereas Diaz, he just doesn't really care. He'll fight anyone, but I think his motivation maybe isn't as intense as what Carlos Condit's going to bring to the game.
Both guys, good strikers. Nick Diaz, a tremendous boxer. Carlos Condit, good strikers, got some submissions. Both guys have fantastic cardio, so this fight could go 5 rounds and then some if they could. But because of the other skill sets that they bring, boxing and striking, you know, it could end a little bit early. Both guys are former champions as well. Nick Diaz, of course, Strikeforce champ, had to vacate that title to come over to the UFC. Carlos Condit, it's been a while. Remember this, it was a while ago, but Carlos Condit, a former WEC champ. So former champions going at it here, and this should be a fantastic fight. Both guys have 13 wins by knockout. 4 straight UFC wins for Carlos Condit. Nick Diaz on an 11-fight win streak. In fact, Nick Diaz, I got here in my notes, he hasn't lost since 2007 against, that was a doctor stoppage to KJ Noons. Last time out, he, of course, sent BJ Penn into retirement. And Carlos Condit and Nick Diaz, that should be a fantastic fight this weekend.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one. I think that's going to be one of those fights that people are going to talk about. Just because it might not be fight of the year, it might not even be the best fight on the card for all we know. But it's the kind of matchup where you know you're getting skill sets. You're getting guys who are skilled. You're getting guys that are hungry. And anytime you put, a strap on the line, and if these guys are fighting for something, and really they're not just fighting for that belt, they're fighting for that opportunity to dethrone who's been the welterweight king for over 5 years now in GSP later this year. So I think there's a lot on the line. These guys are going to fight like there's a lot on the line. It'll be interesting to see how things work out. I mean, I can't really make the call on this fight.
Yeah, this should be a great fight. And speaking of guys who are hungry, how about that for a segue? Roy Big Country Nelson is fighting on the card. He's in a co-main event. Big Country going against Fabricio Verdum, the heavyweights going at it. Fabricio Verdum last time out, it was a decision loss to Alistair Overeem in Strikeforce last June. He's back in the UFC for the first time in a couple of years. Roy Big Country Nelson, last time we saw him, he sent Crow Cop into retirement.
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of Roy Nelson. I've even had the opportunity many years ago to compete against Roy Nelson in the grappling tournament down in South Carolina. So, I'm always a fan of his, a bigger guy out there really kind of showing people that you don't always have to look like Alistair Overeem to be this outstanding, crazy fighter. But that said, his jiu-jitsu will not help him one bit. I mean, Fabricio Verdum is one of the best heavyweight jiu-jitsu competitors, period. He's up there with the Hodger Gracies of the world and really anyone else in the heavyweight range. That said, he's got really underrated striking. I mean, we saw that when he fought Fedor Emelianenko in Strikeforce. He's definitely shown that he's very comfortable in his feet. He's got a lot of training here for Crow Cop over the years there in Malaysia. He's highly skilled. He's very motivated. And really, I think he looks at Roy Nelson as like this is a doorstep. This is a stepping stone for him. Welcome him back into the UFC since he's been away for a while. Roy Nelson, I mean, even though he did beat Crow Cop, he needs this win. He needs to show.
He's lost 3 of his last 4.
Right.
Or
So
2 of his last 3.
He needs to show Dana White, he needs to show the Fertittas that, yes, I can keep my physique, stay in the heavyweight division. You don't need me to rush down to 205 yet. But if he loses, and he loses solely based on he's really too small to be a heavyweight, and he's just getting muscled around and just kind of beat up in all aspects, then I could either say to him, hey, look, Roy, you're gonna have to cut to 205. You're gonna have to vacate. We don't need you. I mean, he's fun and the fans love him, but at the end of the day, from a business perspective, Zupa's got to put the best product they have in the spotlight, and if he's not willing to do what it takes, and that's maybe to cut 40 pounds.
Yeah.
He easily can cut.
Yep.
Just coming from a big guy, I know he can cut to 40 pounds. It kind of makes you question his desire to really be a professional fighter in the UFC.
Yeah, he was a former IFL champion, and he was the winner in the Ultimate Fighter Season 10. Surprising a lot of people there, including Dana White at that point as
Did
well.
not surprise me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I knew what he brought to the table before he was ever on top. I think a lot of people discredit him again purely on looks. And I'm telling you, the guy is really got some great skill sets. He's got a lot of power, but again, he's definitely not being consistent in terms of he says he wants to get better, but he's doing the things that really, if he was really training hard, he would still be swimming 55 pounds instead of 40 on that.
Absolutely. So it's a classic striker in Roy Nelson going against the grappler, BJJ, ground game guy in Fabricio Verdum. So should be a good fight there. Also in the welterweight division, Josh Koscheck will take on Mike Pierce. Koscheck, he's won 4 of his last fights. 4 of his last 5 fights. The only loss in there was to GSP. So he's looking to get back in the title hunt in the welterweight division. Last time we saw him, first round knockout, quick knockout of Matt Hughes, UFC 135. Mike Pierce, meanwhile, 13-4. His wins are split, 6 knockouts, 6 decisions, but this guy has never been finished.
Yeah, and anytime you fight a guy like Josh Koscheck, that is a hard matchup. I'm not a huge Josh Koscheck fan on a personal level, but as a professional athlete, he is hard to deal with. I mean, how do you game plan for a guy that came into the sport with really no skills other than wrestling, and is evolved into this guy who can knock people out with his feet, he gets people in trouble with his legs, he knocked out a legend in Matt Hughes, he showed tremendous upside on his submission ability, he trains with a great camp. I mean, there's probably not a deeper camp at 170 pounds than AKA. I mean, he's got great people around him, and he wants back in this title picture. And I really think in this fight, very similar to the Rashad Evans, Phil Davis fight, you have a guy who's getting an opportunity because right now it's just how the cards fell. He's getting the chance in Mike Pierce to fight at Josh Koscheck. And I'm not sure he really has the skill sets, or has he been in the deep end of the pool enough to know what it's going to take to beat a guy like Josh Koscheck.
Yeah, and Koscheck, he's a wrestler. He was a national champion in the NCAA. Mike Pierce, he's known for his takedowns, likes to do some ground and pound once he gets his opponents to the ground there. So this fight will probably be a stand-up for the most part. This fight, we'll see, but should be an exciting fight as well. Again, UFC 143 in Vegas this weekend on pay-per-view against Super Bowl weekend. All right, coming up, we're going to wrap things up, but we talked earlier about some controversial judging, especially in the Chael Sonnen and Michael Bisping fight, not only in who won, but how the fight was scored. And a lot of people might not know what goes behind judging, what they're really looking for. What the average person just sees, oh, this guy looked better, so he should win. But they actually score some things to how they score the fight. There are some things they're actually looking for. This man knows a lot about it. He'll share his knowledge with you next in the cage.
The Ohio Combat Sports Academy, Central Ohio's premier MMA training facility.
Back in the cage alongside Dustin Ware on Milan Jordan. And we talked about judging in our first segment this past weekend, UFC on Fox in Chicago. Chael Sonnen defeated Michael Bisping by unanimous decision, which surprised a lot of people. Even more surprising is one of the judges scored the fight 30-27 for Chael Sonnen. You look at the the total fight, Bisping won, but you go round by round, 10-point scoring system, and that's how Bisping won the fight. And Dustin, you have experience with judges, and how does that work out? What are the judges looking for? People, the average person, just thinks, okay, this guy looked like he hit the other guy more, looks like he did more damage. But what are the judges looking for?
I think let's take a step back and see where we came from with this. And early on in MMA, a lot of the times these shows, when states were trying to regulate the sport, one of the curriculum a lot of promoters tried to self-impose on their judges, whether or not the state had this rule or not, was damage, visible damage, and really that was the easiest to me. And Monty Cox, who's really a godfather in the MMA community, his big thing was if one guy's looks more beat up than the other, then that should play some weight into the scoring of the fight. Whether or not he got swept a bunch of times or he did a bunch of stuff that looked really tricky, got out a bunch of submissions, who got beat up more? I mean, at the end of the day, it is a fight. So that is something I think should always be taken into consideration when judging. However, each state's bylaws are somewhat different. At the end of the day, it's, are you controlling the fight? Are you the one that's kind of dictating the pace and the position and the pacing of the match? That, when I was a judge, here in the state of Ohio, I've judged fights in Kentucky. That was one of the things that I looked for. Who was really controlling how the fight took place? Damage was something I always played in the back of my mind. Effective striking, effective grappling, you have to take those things into play. However, what we typically see is a lot of these referees in a lot of states, including still Nevada, Illinois, even not so much in Ohio. We have some pretty good judges here, but I've seen some questionable decisions here as well. A lot of them come from a more traditional stand-up background, and so, in their opinion, the worst possible thing that can happen to a striker or a fighter in general is to be taken down and then maybe held there. And in my opinion, that does show some level of dominance in a fight. However, a lot of times, even if a fighter doesn't do much, he can still win the round. And fighters like Koscheck, fighters, even Diego saying, fighters who know how to work around these rules can really take it to their advantage. They can keep it on their feet for the first 4.5 minutes, shoot for a takedown the last 30 seconds. All you got to do is get 3 takedowns in a fight. 15 minutes, you win. You think about that. You take someone down 3 times, do enough to stay, control the pacing, do the attributes I talked about, get 3 takedowns, win the fight.
All right, now you mentioned just some of the criteria: effective grappling, effective striking, cage control. Ideally, do all those hold equal weight, or is that kind of subjective to each particular judge, or even each each athletic commission?
I think it goes down to the perception of what each judge individually, what their experiences bring. I think that's why it's so important to have experienced judges and refs that are involved in this. To go out and get someone who maybe has years of boxing or kickboxing experience, and then all of a sudden you're going to make them judge a UFC or judge any MMA event, I think that's really not the best way to go, because what do they really know about the nuances of the ground game? How effective or how important was that takedown if Bisping was able to scoot his hips right back, stand back up, and receive no real damage from the position? Now, again, I'm not saying take away the points earned that should earn from the takedown, but at the same time, you take someone down, the takedown himself didn't hurt him, didn't damage him. All it showed was for a split second, he was able to put him on his butt, and if that's the case, then we should award someone for being able to get back to their feet. How do we score that as well? So I think damage has to come into play. Again, I'm not calling into question the state of Illinois or their judging criteria. I'm just trying to paint a picture of it is very, very difficult to judge these fights and to get an idea of what judges are thinking, because again, they're bringing their own background into it. As much as we try to say this is what you have to use and use nothing else, this box isn't these people's experiences. They bring what they saw last week in another show, and last week at the show before that, and the show before that, and so they're
learning as they go too.
Exactly. So unless you have guys who have male and female have a wealth of experience, not just in watching fights but training, I think that's a huge one. People should have some kind of relevant background. Again, this is my opinion. This is my utopian world of MMA where all people are equal and everyone gets to train jiu-jitsu and wrestling and Muay Thai and everything. I really think that the judges should have a relevant, real-world background. Not, yes, I went to a clinic and I paid $25 for a license and they told me I can now be a judge. That, to me, is not the UFC champion of the world, because this person who spent 4 hours in a class, but I've spent, 5 years preparing for this moment, and this person who spent 4 hours in a class 6 months ago and judged a couple matches is going to tell me I didn't do enough. And so I know we can always say, well, it's the fighter's fault for letting me go to the judges, but even then, there needs to be
They need to feel comfortable that it goes to the judges.
right. They need to, if I'm a fighter, I want to be comfortable knowing that the people that are at least adjudicating me are knowledgeable, truly knowledgeable. Not I sat through a certification course.
Yeah.
But they understand the nuances of the fight. And I know that's very difficult to do. I know that it's hard to do. I know it's hard to find enough people that are skilled. I mean, case in point, West Virginia had its first show a few weeks back down in Williamson, West Virginia. And through the grapevine, I found out they had to fly in judges from New York, and they had to fly in Dan Mergliata from Jersey, and they had to fly all these people in because obviously the sport was new. And I commend West Virginia for doing this because they knew. They knew what they didn't know. They knew they didn't have enough people in staff, in-house, to effectively, fairly judge and run that aspect of the sport, and so they had to spend the money, whether they did it or whether or not the promoter did it, who knows. But they at least brought people in that had some experience. And so for that, I commend them. Because trust me, I've been to states and I've been to shows where the promoter calls 3 friends and says, hey, I need some judges. Come on over. I know you watched UFC last week.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes how it goes. And so it's really unfortunate. But I really think eventually we will get to a more uniform and a more educated base of people that are actually scoring these fights.
Well, I was going to ask the next question. Do you think, best case scenario, I think what would solve a lot of it would be that if the same rules applied or same criteria applied for every state, like a unified, like a national athletic commission in that sense. Now, that would be great. Real quick here, is that realistic? Do you see it happening in the next, let's say, 5 years?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the rules are pretty much, the criteria for the judging pretty much is the same. But like I said, the criteria for who can be a judge is a little different. I mean, I could probably go into any state and apply for a license and send in my references and give my background and probably be allowed to be a judge. But then again, there's those of you at home that may have taken about 3 or 4 jiu-jitsu classes, went to a couple Muay Thai classes, you've been to a couple fights, you may have 1 or 2 amateur fights, and all of a sudden, you with maybe 8 months of experience could also apply for that same judge's license, take that same course. Me, 1998, I've been training and been involved in sport. June of 2011. Yet we're both going to be judges on a show next week somewhere in, say, Cincinnati, Ohio.
Yeah.
So it's not really. I think that's not right. I mean,
Right,
there needs
exactly.
to be some way to fix that.
Right.
Just because we both applied for a license at the same time, and both took the course at the same time, we're both going to be brought in as new judges.
Yeah.
But do you see where I'm getting with this? I mean, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I don't know. I don't know how we fix it.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be fixed soon. That's the one of the great mysteries in MMA on all levels. That is for sure. All right, this weekend, UFC 143 coming up in Las Vegas. Prediction time. Let's start with the main event. Carlos Condit against Nick Diaz for the welterweight interim title. Who wins?
Carlos Condit. I don't have a reason why.
Okay.
I told you earlier I don't know too much.
It should be a great fight. Can't go wrong either way. I'll go with Nick Diaz. Hard to bet against the Stockton boys, but you know what? It's hard to go against Carlos Condit too, but I'll say Nick Diaz here. Okay, co-main event, Fabricio Verdum going against Roy Big Country Nelson.
I'm going to have to go with Fabricio Verdum.
Yeah.
I mean, he's done it. I like both of them. I like Roy Nelson a lot. I like Verdum, but I just think at the end of the day, Verdum's going to have more to fight for.
And you know what? Both guys, it's a matter of which fighter you get, which Fabricio Verdum you get, which Nelson do you get.
Right.
You know what? I'm with you. I'll say Verdum in this. And then lastly, Josh Koscheck, Mike Pierce. Who do you see? Koscheck easily.
Pretty easy one.
Yeah, Koscheck easily. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if we're right. We'll recap it next week. UFC 143. Also, we'll look ahead to another UFC fight card. Diego Sanchez will be fighting later this month. We'll talk about that. We'll look ahead to Strikeforce. Again, coming to Columbus. First weekend in March 3rd. And February 11th, you got a Spartan Fighting Championship has a big card. SFC 12 in Moorhead, Kentucky. We'll preview that card and a whole lot more. By the way, if you like what we do, A, thank you. B, prove it. Like our Facebook page. Go on Facebook. Check us out on In the Cage. Follow us on Twitter at In the Cage Show. And also, you're catching the show on our YouTube channel, In the Cage Show. Please subscribe to that. We definitely appreciate it. Hope you enjoy it. And we're always welcome to any kind of comments and tell us how you feel about the show. We appreciate you tuning in. So, for our hard-working production crew, For Dustin Ware, I'm Milan Jordan. Thank you so much for joining us this week in the cage.